The old Honda Civic crunched over the gravel of my family's estate driveway, its worn tires humming a familiar tune of defiance. Through the windshield, I saw them, my cousin's luxury cars lined up like showroom trophies: Mercedes, BMW, Audi, all gleaming declarations of what they thought success looked like. I parked at the far end, away from their polished egos. Not out of shame, my 15-year-old car had more character than any of theirs, but because I knew exactly what awaited me: the jabs, the raised brows, the smug smirks, the legend of Alexandra Morgan, fallen from grace. If only they knew. I glanced at my phone before stepping out. My investment dashboard pulsed with numbers that could buy this entire estate twice over. I locked the screen. Tonight wasn't about revealing my hand. Tonight was about watching them play themselves. Before I reached the door, it opened. "Alex." My mother's voice, laced with that familiar blend of disappointment and judgment. "You're late, and you're still driving." "That?" I kissed her cheek, unbothered. "Happy birthday to Dad. And hello to you too, dear," she said, already turning away. Inside, the mansion pulsed with the sound of forced laughter, clinking glasses, and heels tapping on marble. The success parade was in full swing. Marcus flashing his Rolex, Victoria crowing about her promotion to junior partner, Uncle Philip pontificating about his latest real estate conquest like he was narrating Forbes. "Alexandra." My father's voice, deep and commanding, boomed over the crowd. "Finally decided to grace us with your presence." I turned to him, silver-haired, tailored to perfection, surrounded by sycophants. Thomas Morgan, patriarch, tycoon, legend in his own mind. "Happy birthday, Dad." I handed him a small wrapped package. He weighed it in his palm, skeptical. "Another book, I presume?" Only one way to find out. But before he could unwrap it, Derek chimed in. "Probably all she could swing on a teacher's pension." "Oh, wait, she's not even doing that anymore, right?" Laughter rippled through the room. "No," I said, calmly, "I'm not." "So what are you doing these days?" Victoria asked, swirling her wine. "Besides driving that embarrassing car?" I smiled, slowly. "Investment management." Derek barked a laugh. "Sure, because people just love handing over their money to someone who can't even afford a new ride." My father unwrapped the gift, a pristine first edition of his favorite novel, and said nothing. "Alexandra," he said instead, "you might consider something more stable. Philip could use someone in his office. Basic admin work. A start." "Thanks," I said, "but I'm doing fine." Marcus scoffed. "Fine? Is that what we're calling it now? That shoebox apartment? That car that predates the iPhone?" I took a slow sip of water, letting their ignorance settle around me like fog. My phone buzzed, another alert. Another win. Probably another milestone from one of the 37 companies quietly tucked into my portfolio, each one a piece of the private equity firm I built from scratch the moment I walked away from teaching. At least she showed up, my mother offered, always the peacemaker. "Now, shall we head to the dining room?" Dinner was predictable: crystal stemware, vintage wine, tales of yacht rentals and Aspen chalets. Every so often, someone glanced at me, eyes full of pity, or worse, amusement. Then, the moment. "A toast," Uncle Philip declared, rising, "to success, and those fortunate enough to find it." He raised his glass toward me, "and to those still searching." That was it. Not rage, not humiliation, just clarity. They'd spent years mocking my simplicity, mistaking it for failure, measuring life in handbags and hedge funds while I had been quietly building something they couldn't even comprehend. I stood, pulling out my phone. "You're right, Uncle Philip, we can't all be winners." The room quieted. I held up my screen. "How about a game? Let's add up the collective net worth at this table. Homes, cars, portfolios, everything." Derek, always ready to show off, jumped in. "Easy." He tallied numbers shouted from across the table. "Call it 47 million, give or take." I nodded and turned my phone around. "That's cute. Now, would anyone like to guess the net worth of the failed teacher?" Eyes locked on my screen. Silence. 9 digits. Before taxes. Marcus blinked. That can't be right." "Why not?" I tapped through the portfolio. tech acquisitions, commercial properties, private equity. I stopped teaching. Sure, I just didn't stop building. My father's knuckles whitened against the arms of his chair. Alexandra, what are you saying? I'm saying, I met his gaze, unwavering, that while you were all laughing at my car and my rent-controlled apartment, I was building an empire, one that's worth more than this entire family's assets combined. The crystal stem of Victoria's wine glass slipped through her fingers and shattered on the imported marble floor. But how? Uncle Philip's voice was stripped of its usual condescension. I smiled, not out of pride, but from the clarity that only years of quiet work can bring. I thought of the nights I worked while they celebrated themselves, the deals I closed while they bought new toys, the wealth I built while they paraded around in borrowed success. I learned early, I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket, that real wealth isn't loud. It doesn't need applause. It just needs to grow. Silence settled over the room like a fog bank. But not for long. People with fragile egos don't stay quiet. Prove it, Derek snapped, cheeks flushed. Anyone can flash numbers on a screen. I reached for my briefcase, nothing flashy, just classic, worn leather, and unlatched the clasp. Funny, I actually brought something for after dinner, but I guess now's the right time. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, hard documentation, bank statements, property deeds, company ownerships, proof of every move I'd made while they were busy judging my choices. Marcus snatched it first, his hands visibly shaking as he flipped through the pages. This is legit, he whispered. I built it all, every page, every number. Victoria leaned over, her perfect brows furrowed. Morgan Global Ventures, that's you? I nodded once. It's one of mine. Recognition hit her like a slap. I saw the panic in her eyes. The firm she'd been desperately clawing her way up in? I bought it last quarter. She just hadn't put two and two together. But, you were teaching, my mother said, barely above a whisper. I was, and learning, and investing. You'd be amazed what kids say about their parents' businesses when they think you're just a teacher. I gave a small shrug. Blind spots, market trends, corporate weaknesses, you just have to listen. My father hadn't touched the folder. He was staring at me like I was a stranger. Why keep it secret? He finally asked. Why the old car? The apartment? Because I never needed you to believe in me. I needed time, space, and because every time you laughed at the Civic, you reminded me exactly what kind of people I was outperforming. Uncle Philip scoffed, grasping for control. So all this secrecy, this deception, that's success to you? No, I said calmly. This is success, showing up in the same Civic you mocked, and quietly owning the debt that keeps your company afloat. I pulled out a second document and laid it on the table. 3 months ago, when your firm was desperate for investors to avoid bankruptcy, that was me, through a holding company. Philip went pale. You're lying. Check the signature page, or don't. Either way, the board meeting is Monday. I suggest you bring a revised business plan. The room erupted. Victoria gasped, her mascara finally betraying her composure. Marcus began frantically typing into his phone. Derek stared blankly at his watch, now looking more like costume jewelry than power. My mother gripped my father's arm. Thomas. He raised a hand, eyes still locked on me. How long? I shook my head. There wasn't a plan, just purpose. You all made it a game, measured success in square footage and car badges. I just didn't play by your rules. I stood and began gathering my things. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a full day tomorrow. Acquiring companies takes more than loud dinners and louder suits. Victoria found her voice. My firm, are you going to fire me? I met her eyes. No, I don't believe in using power to punish, but I do believe in performance. Merit matters in my companies, not family names. I turned to leave, but my father stopped me one last time. The book, he said, voice low. That first edition, how much did it cost? I paused. More than your house, Dad, but I bought it because I remembered you reading it to me when I was little, back when stories mattered more to you than image. For the first time in years, I saw something shift in his expression, not shame, not pride, just humanity. And the car? He asked quietly. I smiled. Because it works, and because every time you mocked it, you revealed who you were. It was the most honest research I could ever ask for. I stepped toward the door, then turned one last time. Oh, and Philip? The board packet includes a leadership restructure proposal. You might want to read that before Monday. The drive back was quiet, the Civic humming like a familiar friend. At home, I pulled into my spot, still the modest apartment complex, still the same space I'd started in. I could buy the whole building twice over. But why? My phone buzzed. Dozens of messages, relatives asking to talk, reconnect, suddenly interested in catching up. I ignored them. Because tomorrow wasn't about family validation. It was about 3 acquisition calls, 1 funding round for a tech startup, and finalizing the launch of the education fund I was creating for others like me. The so-called failures. The ones quietly building their own empires. Let them stew in their shock. Let them sit with the realization that while they were buying status symbols, I was buying actual symbols of success, companies, innovations, opportunities. They thought last night was the big reveal. They had no idea what was coming next. The morning after my father's birthday dinner, I sat in my office on the top floor of an unmarked building in downtown Manhattan. No company logo on the door. No flashy signage. Just quiet power. The way I liked it. Sarah, my assistant, stepped in with my morning coffee. Unlike my family's curated preferences, I preferred a simple dark roast in a plain ceramic mug. Your father's in the lobby, she said, wide-eyed. He's been here since we opened. I glanced at my watch. 7:30 a.m. How long? Security says he arrived at 6. I smiled slightly. Thomas Morgan, waiting for anyone, let alone for an hour and a half. That was new. Send him up in 10 minutes, I said, turning back to my screen. When he walked in, he looked different. The suit was perfect as ever, but something had shifted. The aristocratic posture was gone, replaced with something almost humble. Alexandra. He stood there awkwardly, caught between sitting or remaining on his feet. This is quite an office. I gestured to a chair. What can I do for you, Dad? He sat, eyes scanning the space. No awards, no art, just clean lines, clear purpose. Your mother is, we're all. He struggled. Yesterday was quite a shock. I imagine it was. He handed me his phone. Wall Street Journal headline. Morgan Global Ventures acquires tech giant for $2.1 billion. I raised an eyebrow. That wasn't supposed to hit until market open. The Morgan in the company name, he said, quietly. That's really you. Yes. Why didn't you ever tell us? Tell me? I leaned back. Would you have listened? Really listened? Or would you have tried to take control, like you always did? He flinched. I only wanted what was best for me, I finished. No, Dad. You wanted what looked best. There's a difference. The silence that followed was heavy. Below us, the city began to hum with life, unaware of the reckoning unfolding on the top floor. Your Uncle Philip is worried, he said finally. He should be. I pulled up a file and turned the monitor toward him. His development company has been mismanaged for years, projects delayed, investors nervous, the book's a mess. I paused. I'm not the only one who's noticed. You're going to take it from him? No, I said. I'm going to fix it. Whether he stays depends on him. Like I said last night, merit matters. He was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, the Honda. I laughed. Still stuck on that? I leaned forward. Tell me, Dad, what's worth more? A car that gets me where I need to go, or the 3 startups I bought instead of wasting money on a status symbol? He didn't answer. My phone buzzed. Market open. Another acquisition climbing. I have work to do, I said, standing. Was there anything else? He stood, too, straightened his tie, an old nervous habit. Your mother wants to have dinner, the whole family, to apologize, I think. I shook my head. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in understanding. I met his eyes. Do they understand now? That success isn't about what you show, but what you build. He sighed. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm starting to. My phone buzzed again. The stock was surging. I'll think about dinner, I said. But first, I have a company to run. Actually, several. After he left, Sarah stepped in. The board of Philip's company is requesting an emergency meeting. Victoria left 3 messages about her role, and your mother sent flowers. I raised a brow. The flowers? I had them sent to the children's hospital, she said, smiling, per your standing instructions. I turned back to my work. Sarah, if any more family members show up. I know. They need an appointment, just like everyone else. The next few weeks were interesting. My cousin found humility. Uncle Philip stepped down. Professionals stepped in. Victoria finally earned a promotion, on merit. And my father? He did something I never expected. He sold his Bentley. Bought a Toyota. When I asked why, he said something that finally made me proud. Because I realized, what you drive doesn't matter nearly as much as where you're going. 6 months later, I hosted a family dinner. Not at a Michelin-starred restaurant. At my modest apartment. Same one, still mine. They all came. Dressed simpler. Speaking softer. Over homemade pasta, yes, I cook. My mother finally asked the question I'd waited years to hear. How did you do it, Alexandra? Really? They weren't smug anymore. They weren't judging. Just curious. I watched, I said, I learned, I stayed quiet, and I built something real, while you all were busy building appearances. I took a sip of wine. Not a $100 bottle, just something I liked. And most importantly, I never confused having money with having worth. Victoria nodded. You taught us something, Alex, even if we didn't want to learn it. I smiled. That's what teachers do best. That night, after everyone had gone, I stood at the window. My phone buzzed again. Another acquisition. Another quiet win. But this time, I didn't need to prove anything. Not to them. Not even to myself. Because true success? It's not about proving your worth to others. It's about knowing your worth and building from there. One silent victory at a time. In a Honda Civic that carried me farther than all their luxury cars ever could.